Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the video about Jordan Peterson's recovery that was posted on Mikhaila Peterson's YouTube channel. In this video that was recorded in Serbia and posted on June 30, 2020, Jordan and Mikhaila discuss how he's doing after struggling with benzodiazepine withdrawal. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So here I'm going to go through some of the different items covered in that video and offer my opinion as I go, but also bring it all together for analysis at the end. Now, this was a 56-minute video. Normally, I'm quite critical of videos that go on this long, but there was really no wasted time here. It was as long as it needed to be. During the interview, Jordan Peterson and Mikhaila essentially told the story of how Jordan ended up in the situation. Jordan Peterson's wife, Tammy, had surgery for cancer some time ago. 6 weeks after that surgery, she was told that the cancer was terminal. No treatment would likely help her. Tammy and her family eventually decided that another surgery was the best option, and that surgery was successful even though there were many complications. All this understandably created a great deal of stress on everybody in that family. Now, moving over to Jordan Peterson's experience, we see that he was taking a benzodiazepine called Klonopin starting in 2016. He had eaten some bad food and developed symptoms like insomnia and fainting, so he was prescribed 0.5 milligram of Klonopin per day, taken twice a day at 0.25 milligram. So this was a small dose. Now, combining these experiences, Tammy is in this life-threatening situation. Jordan is taking benzodiazepines. Due to the stress of all this, he asked for more Klonopin. Now, initially in the interview, he did not say how much, but later we learn it's 4 milligrams a day. That's a significant difference from 0.5 milligrams a day. I'm surprised his dose was increased that much, but this is what he said happened. After the increase in dosage, his anxiety increased, which, as he noted, is rare. Typically, the anxiety would decrease quite a bit, especially at that dose. Jordan then attempted to stop, going from 4 milligrams a day to 0, which is exceedingly dangerous. He said he was advised to do this. It's hard to imagine he was given that advice, but again, this is what he states. At some point during all this, he developed akathisia. This is a really miserable condition that involves the inability to stop moving. So it's like restlessness. He described it like being electrocuted nonstop. He also described later in the video that it was worse than dying. So pretty bad, pretty uncomfortable for him, and clearly a symptom that he wanted to resolve. So the fundamental problem really became this. The Klonopin was causing akathisia, which is causing him to suffer tremendously, so he needed to stop taking the Klonopin, but if he stopped taking it, he would have serious withdrawal symptoms. Normally, the solution here is to taper. This means to come off the medication slowly, which of course runs into the same problem, in his case, akathisia. So he was really stuck with no terrific options here. Now, after a few attempts to effectively treat him on the eastern seaboard of the United States and eventually in Toronto, his daughter, with the consent of his family and ostensibly with his consent, decided to take him to a facility on the outskirts of Moscow in Russia. They used medications to render him unconscious. He was unconscious for 9 days. While he was unconscious, they detoxed him from the Klonopin. Now, from what we are to understand from this interview, Jordan had pneumonia upon his arrival in Russia. So this is where things get a bit tricky in terms of trying to understand what really happened. They made it seem like he was sedated, essentially put into a medically induced coma, in order to detox him from the Klonopin. But of course, it could have been that he was sedated so he could be treated for the pneumonia. Unless there's more information that comes out here, it's really hard to figure out what happened. Why did they put him in a coma? Running under the assumption that the sedation was specifically to detox from Klonopin, there is no scientific evidence that supports that method. There's no reason to believe that's safe. One of the themes of this interview was really defending that decision. I realized that they were frustrated and they had to talk to a number of other treatment professionals in North America, but I don't see how this could have been a good move. It certainly seems like the decision was made with the best intentions, but that is different than critical thinking. I think this interview could leave someone with the impression that Mikhaila acted in a manner that saved her father's life, especially the emotional ending of that interview. Although I suppose it makes a compelling narrative, again, there's no scientific reason to believe that that's true. The methods available in North America would have likely resulted in success without exposing Jordan to high risk. The vast majority of the time when confronted with a mental health issue, science offers the best answer. Not intuition, not rebelling against the system, not working from one's experience, not basing the decision on what somebody needs to happen. Now, I don't know if any of those were active here. I don't know what the situation was specifically in this instance. But in general, science is a better way to go. Now, with all that in mind, Jordan successfully stabilized at that facility, and after this he was moved to another rehab facility still in Russia. Then we see he travels to Florida, but his anxiety was still too high, so he ends up in Serbia. And again, this is where that interview takes place. So stepping back and looking at this whole interview, I think the overall message was positive. I've talked before about how benzodiazepines can be quite dangerous for some people. A number of mental health professionals do not understand how harmful the withdrawal can be. So more awareness on this topic is a good thing. I particularly like the fact that Jordan touched on the idea that when people become dependent on substances, others tend to believe the person played some role in their dependence. This is one of those complex areas of mental health. I've seen examples where a person essentially had no responsibility in their own dependence, and other situations where the person seemed to go into it with a lot of clarity. They used knowing the risks. I've also seen everywhere in between. So there are no easy answers here. So again, I think this was a good point for him to mention. Overall, I liked the interview, but there are a few things that were said during the interview that I have difficulty with outside of the whole going to Russia for treatment part. Jordan said that benzodiazepines are probably worse than the opioid epidemic. I can remove all doubt on this point. No, they're not. I can appreciate his frustration, and he did acknowledge that this was kind of a controversial statement, but the statistics are simply indisputable on this point. In the year 2018, in the United States, almost 46,800 people died from overdoses that involved opioids. In that same year, benzodiazepines were involved in 10,700 deaths, which is actually down 800 from the year before. When opioids are 4.5 times more likely to lead to death for any given person, I would say that makes them more dangerous. I think it's fair to say that benzodiazepines are more insidious. When people take opioids, they often know there is a substantial risk associated with them, especially if they're illegal. When people take benzodiazepines, they don't always understand that they're taking something that could be dangerous. At first glance, they seem innocuous compared to opioids. Jordan also said that benzodiazepine use was associated with an increased risk of dementia. There was research that indicated a weak link between those two events, but later research with a very large sample size found that there is no relationship. I understand why people think there is. If someone is using benzodiazepines, their memory is affected, their reasoning skills are not as sharp, so it's natural to think maybe this is connected to dementia. But from a statistical point of view, they are completely unrelated to one another. The last thing I'll talk about here, my last criticism, would be this. There are always two sides to a story, and I like to hear both sides before I settle on what I think really happened. From what Jordan and Mikhaila are saying, they talked to many mental health professionals who gave them bad advice. Presumably, after completing an evaluation, after looking at data from lab work, these professionals just kept recommending treatment that was unhelpful or even dangerous. Now again, this is what they claim. Now, if they said they went to one professional and received some bad advice, I would say, okay, that happens all the time. That's fairly believable. But they're saying they went to something like 5 different professionals in North America. The chances that all 5 would give bad advice are very low. Another possibility is perhaps they didn't like what they were hearing. It wasn't so much that the treatment advice was reckless, but maybe they couldn't accept it. I don't know this. Again, their version of events could be 100% correct. But this is something I wonder about. What is the story of those professionals? How did they remember the situation? What would they say about their experience, about what advice they gave? Of course, it's fairly likely that we'll never know. But again, I wonder about what their side of the story would be. So I guess what I'm saying here is that overall, this was a good interview. Benzodiazepines are dangerous, but anything can be taken too far. It's important when trying to make changes in policy and opinions that representations are accurate, right? It's good not to exaggerate or to take one situation and say this must be true for every situation, right? There was a lot of overgeneralizing that could have taken place here. As I've noted before in other videos, for some people, benzodiazepines are nothing short of a life-saving medication. I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss the symptoms that people have when they seek treatments that involve something like benzodiazepines. Every course of treatment, even counseling that involves no medications, comes with risk, right? Risk is everywhere. What we have to do is accurately evaluate the risk, not say, okay, just because one thing could be harmful, we should avoid that. Sometimes we have to take risks in order to enjoy the potential rewards. It's just part of the math, part of the logic of life. So it's easy to look at everything that's possibly threatening and say, well, I'm not going to get involved in that. I'm going to stay away from that. But there could be a cost to not taking that risk. In the case of something like benzodiazepines, it's used to lower anxiety. It also has a number of other functions. Just taking anxiety, for example, this causes a tremendous amount of suffering for millions of people. So situations like this interview, again, may be quite compelling. People might look at the interview and say, okay, there's a clear-cut course here. But really there's not. This was the experience of Jordan Peterson and his family. And it does seem like it was quite painful. But that's not necessarily what everybody in that situation would experience. Each person is unique and will have experiences that differ from other people. So those are my thoughts on the Jordan Peterson interview. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.